Hello, West Ham Network. It's Holly, and today we are going to be discussing whether Guilherme is ready or whether there's a little bit more work needing doing behind the scenes. Let's go. Yes, West Ham Network. Now, for the Villa game, 18-year-old Luis Guilherme was available for selection, according to Sean Whetstone. But apparently, Somerville was given that spot on the bench instead of the Brazilian. So the bench did, of course, include the likes of Danny Ings, who came on towards the end, and Andy Irving, who didn't get to play. But having paid £25.5 million for Guilherme, many were quite confused as to why he didn't even make the bench. He might not have expected to start, but I'm sure he would have been disappointed at not even getting the opportunity to come off the bench and show what he could do if he was called upon. And it's just another sign of Lopetegui being ruthless in his selection and sticking to what he believes is going to work. But a question mark does remain over whether Luis Guilherme is ready for the Premier League or if he still has work to do. So when I spoke to South American football expert Tim Vickery, he explained to me how Guilherme has been bought for his potential by West Ham and that he's not necessarily ready for the Premier League. So here is what he had to say when we spoke. Guilherme looks to be an incredibly promising 18-year-old that West Ham is said to be in quite advanced talks with now. It's been reported that West Ham and Palmeiras are at the stage of structuring a deal, and it sounds as though it could be advancing quite well. But given that not too many West Ham fans will have heard of him until recently, what can you tell us about Guilherme, and what do you think he could bring to West Ham if he were to sign?
Well, he's only got one goal.
Yeah.
It was a cracker. It was an absolute cracker, and it won a game. So, as is obvious when you're interested in someone who's 18 years of age, you're buying much, much more on promise than you are on reality. And really, I think the marker for so many of these deals is Vinicius Junior. Yeah. Because when Real Madrid bought him, they couldn't take him till he was 18, but they bought him at the age of 16. And he hadn't played a senior game, and they spent 40 million on him. And it seemed like madness. And it's turned out to be an extraordinary bargain. And that kind of deal, I think, has changed the market. When the European clubs, they wanted the players young. But from the success of that one, they want them at 18 if they can. You know, if it's rare, there is a case that we might get to in a minute for players who get over the 22, 23 mark. It's rare then if they're still in South America for European clubs to be interested. So that they want them as young as possible, which inevitably means we are talking about promise rather than reality. In the case of Luis Guilherme, Palmeiras have so much promise. Their youth work has been doing such remarkable stuff. You know, they've got Endrick, who's 18, who's just about to go to Real Madrid. They've got Estevan, who's 17, who looks like he's joining Chelsea in a year's time. And it means that Luis Guilherme has been a little bit overshadowed. But he is very, very interesting. Now, I saw that before that West Ham were said to be interested in another winger from across Sao Paulo, Wesley at Corinthians. Yes. And the interesting thing about both of these, and they're very different in the sense that Wesley is right-footed and cuts in, and Luis Guilherme is left-footed. But the thing that they have in common is that these aren't lightweights. These are physical. And Luis Guilherme is not particularly tall, but he's physically built. He is extremely quick, lightning pace, left foot. Hasn't had that many opportunities to play. I mean, Palmeiras won the Brazilian Championship last year, so it's not a side that's struggling. So he's had to take his opportunities where they come. The coach, it's a European coach, Portuguese coach, very, very good coach, a kind of young version of Jose Mourinho. Abel Ferreira thinks the world of him. And he's played most of his football wide right, using that pace down the flanks. I think Abel really thinks he's probably better played a little bit infield.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I don't know if you saw that one goal that he scored in stoppage time against Independiente del Valle. But he's got a kick like a mule. So I think what the Palmeiras coach has been trying to get out of him is rather than having him from the flanks, have him a little bit infield from the half space and then cutting in, where he's got more opportunity to bear down on goal.
Yeah, so that's interesting as well, because where we've got Bowen and Kudus on the right, there are quite a few questions over whether Guilherme could play more centrally or even on the left, or whether that would be sort of wasting his talent, I suppose.
Well, the big thing here with the adaptation between English football and Brazilian football is that in Brazil, the defensive lines tend to play much, much deeper. So there's much more space on the field. You know, and that zone infield, that is obviously, that's where the marking is tightest. So it's tough for a player of his type to pick up the ball with acceleration space there, you know. So that would be interesting, and it would be very, very much a case of West Ham developing him slowly. I don't think this is a player who's going to go straight in and make an immediate impact. This is one when you're building a little bit for the future. We saw slightly similar this year with Crystal Palace, with Mateus França at Palace. Now, they've got so much talent there that exploded Crystal Palace, that it ended up not mattering that much, that they didn't get much out of Mateus França this season. But I don't see that as a failure at all on the part of the player. That was exactly what I would have expected from Mateus França, because he didn't have a great deal behind him. You know, a few more games than Luis Guilherme. So, you know, from a player operating in that position, there's a huge learning curve ahead, and that will be the case with Luis Guilherme if he does make the move. But if you're a defender facing him, you're going to be a little bit intimidated by that blistering pace that he's got.
Very interesting. And I suppose these are the pros and cons, aren't there, of almost finding this untapped talent and getting them early, and then being able to develop them is a key part of actually being able to turn them into a player that will work in the Premier League and will adapt to play at clubs like West Ham. So there you have it. That was what we had to say when we spoke with Tim Vickery. But given the fact that Guilherme is so young and does have a lot of promise, as you heard there, it could well be that Lopetegui wants to develop him a little bit more just before we prioritise him in our starting 11. And I'm sure that Guilherme is going to be working very hard behind the scenes to prove himself, especially with plenty of competition from the likes of Bowen, Kudus, Somerville, Paqueta. But on the bright side, one of the positives that I can take from this is that our inability to fit him in does highlight just how many attacking options we now have as a team, because we wouldn't all necessarily have chosen some of the players that did come off the bench and that were also on that bench. But clearly Lopetegui thought that what he did gave us more options depending on how the game played out. And he seems to be a very different signing, Guilherme, to the rest, and more of an investment for the future, I'd say. So clearly Steiten and the team have identified him as a player with a big future and the attributes that we do need. But I'm sure they're going to be very keen to get him up to that Premier League standard and playing sooner rather than later, especially seeing as we have paid more than £25 million for him. That's not the kind of player that you just stick in the background and hope that he'll progress. So personally, I'm really, really excited to see Guilherme play. So here's hoping he is given that chance soon and he grabs it with both hands. So it's impossible for him to be left out of the squad in the future. But the question that I have for you is, do you think Guilherme should be starting, or do you see him more of a long-term project despite the price tag that we've paid for him? So let us know down in the comment section, and if you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up so that we know that you've enjoyed it. That's all from me for now, but tune in at 5 p.m. where I'm going to be running through Hammers headlines for today, and it's definitely going to be an interesting few weeks coming up as we see who Lopetegui chooses, whether his starting 11 is going to change significantly as more players are available, or whether he's going to stick and give game time to the players that he has been giving time to so far. It's going to be a very interesting one. Keep your eyes peeled. Until next time, come on you Irons.